Hey there, this is Alex over at DuraLabel, and in this video I'm going to be going over a bit of an advanced guide for the label design module in our LabelForge PRO program. In order to do that, I'm going to be redesigning a rack label that we can see here in my favorites, but we're going to start from the beginning. So I'll go ahead and open up Label Designer and show the process that I went through for it. Now that we have the label design module open, we're going to go ahead and ultimately just click this create new label. I am going to be making some changes to the width and length of this. This is going to be something that we're printing through our Kodiak Max printer since it has dual color functionality. That way we can get both some of those blue triangles for some color aesthetics, as well as the black for the barcode, as well as the additional information on the label. So for now, I'll hit create new label. And now I'm going to go into the settings menu itself, which will just be right here above our print option. You'll notice that we begin in the custom label SKU, which will be perfect for what we're utilizing because we're going to want to be adjusting both this width as well as the length. We're also going to be adjusting from this landscape orientation to a portrait orientation for this print. I'm going to begin by adjusting the length, and in this instance we're just going to have that be 3, and we're going to begin for the width with 5 inches. This will be getting updated later through it, but to design this first half of the label I'm going to begin with a 3x5 and change that over to portrait. Now that we have our canvas updated, I'm going to go back into the insert menu, and we're actually going to add the triangles that I'm going to put in the top left corner as well as this bottom right corner, and then we're also going to be changing those colors to blue as well. From this insert section, I'm going to click on shape. We're going to go ahead and change this to a triangle. I'll then go into the color palette itself, where I'm going to change this fill color as well as the border to blue. This border is going to get changed a little bit later, but for right now I at least want a uniform color while I'm doing this current design. I'm also going to deselect this round option, that way I have the sharper edges on the actual label itself. From here, we're going to go into the object size menu, and we're actually going to adjust this to be a 3x3 for the actual triangle itself. In order to do that, I'm going to utilize clicking this lock aspect ratio here, highlight this length, and I'm just going to change that to 3 inches, hit enter. That'll update the actual size itself, so this is what we're going to be working with. I'm going to click it again just to highlight it, go back into this object size option, and we're actually going to rotate this as well. That way it looks a little better up in this top left corner. And we also need to now get this centered over in the corner. So to do that, we know that we need this in the top left. We also know that this top left area is going to be what determines the X and Y axis. So what I'm going to be doing here, I'll just go into X, change that to 0, go into Y as well, and change that to 0. In order to add that second triangle, what I'm going to first do is I'll click on the first triangle. There's a couple different ways you can go about this depending on preference. We're ultimately just going to be copy and pasting this triangle. You can either use these two options at the top. This left option copies, this right option pastes. If you would like from a keyboard, you can also use Control-C and Control-V. This is going to paste it right over the same, so even though it currently doesn't look like it, there is a second triangle on it. And what I'm going to do next, we'll go back into object size, and I'm going to rotate this about 180 degrees again. That way it just faces that other direction. Next, we just need to move this triangle over so that it's in that bottom right corner as well. In order to do this, we're going to use the object position. We're going to adjust the X value itself. X is going to move that way. Y will move us this way, depending positive or negative. In this instance, we're going to stick positive. That way it moves over to the right itself. I'm just going to adjust that X to a 2, and that will put it right where I want it. From here, I just need to add a barcode into the center section that I want. That way we can scan it and get all the information that we need for the exact location where this is going to be at. We're also going to be adding some numbers up in this top left that are going to signal which bay this is, and we're going to add an arrow just pointing to where the object stored is. I'll go ahead and begin by adding a linear barcode into this label. We don't need to worry about changing anything for this data. In a couple steps later through this, I'm going to go over actually adding an Excel spreadsheet into this, which is going to host the data that we're ultimately going to be keeping in this barcode. For the barcode itself, all we really need to do is just rotate this once, and then we're going to need to resize it just a little bit until we're happy with the look of it. I'll go ahead and go back into this object size. I'm going to rotate it to the left, that way I get it at the angle. We're going to have that HRT text that's at the bottom. This HRT text is not actually going to be visible in the final product for this design, but for right now we'll have it there just kind of as a point of understanding where this barcode's rotating. I'm going to go into this object order itself, and we're going to go ahead and center it. I'm going to use this a couple more times throughout this process. I'm just going to be guessing and checking a little bit with the actual sizing of the barcode until I'm happy with how it looks on the label, so I may come back a few times. But for right now, I'm going to go into this object size. I'm going to deselect this lock aspect ratio because it remembers the previous setting that we had. And for now, I'm just going to increase the length, which you'll see it extends the barcode itself outward, and then we're going to increase the width. Ultimately, I want to make sure that however wide I increase this, the end result is that this human readable text, or HRT, is going to be underneath the actual triangles themselves. All right, we're going to go ahead and see if I've sized this up enough to actually fit under the triangles themselves. So while I still have this selected, I'll go back into this object order, and I'm going to use our layering features to actually hide this underneath the blue text itself. These two options on the left are either going to send an object all the way forward like it is right now, or it'll send something all the way back as well. If you ever need to move something by individual layers, this will move it in front by 1, and this will move it in back by 1. We're going to click on this again, make sure that we're all the way in the back, and I'm going to use align to label just to make sure that right now that HRT is not visible. Now that we have this under, we can still see that there's a little bit of a gap for the actual barcode itself here. One thing that we're going to need to do is I do want to get rid of that little gap. I'm actually going to create a gap utilizing the borders of these triangle shapes that we had added earlier. So what I'm going to do in this instance, this is currently at the bottom layer. So I'm going to try to click in the center because depending on where you click, you might accidentally select one of the triangles. If you ever do that though, you can use tab from your keyboard to cycle through the objects that you do have. Luckily, I was still able to click on that barcode, so I don't need to in this demonstration, but to just show, I'm hitting tab a couple times, and you can see that it cycles through different items. I'll go ahead and click back on that barcode itself, and I do want to increase the size. I want to get rid of that gap specifically, so I'm going to increase the length a little bit, as well as the width a little more as well. I'll click back on this object order, realign it to the label. All I'm really looking for is making sure that that gap itself is gone. Right now, it looks like it is mostly gone. There's a little bit left. That'll be enough for what we're doing on our side, though, so I'll leave that as is. And I'll go ahead and add the actual borders back into those triangle shapes. Okay, from here, we'll go ahead and click on one of our triangles, click on that paint palette again. We already went in here once for the border. We're going to go back in, though, and instead of having it blue like we changed earlier, I'm going to change this to white. And for that gap itself, I do want it to be a little wider, so I'm going to increase the weight of this to about 3. I like that distance between the two. I'll click on this as well for the other triangle, make those same exact changes, change the border to white, and increase that weight to 3. From here, all that I really need to continue adding is we're going to add that text in this top left as well as an arrow here. Then we'll be done with this beginning portion of the design. Once we finish that, we're going to move on to a little inventory tag that'll give an actual item description, SKU, as well as even a QR code that'll actually link to our website to purchase the supply that's going to be stored in that rack. Next, we're going to add the actual text into this label. I'll use this ABC text for now. And in this instance, what I'm ultimately going to be doing is I'm just going to be making a mock version of the label. I'm going to be using the data that I have on the spreadsheet, and I'm going to be following that along just to kind of get a rough idea of what's on. We'll make some changes to some sizing later, depending on how everything looks once that spreadsheet's merged. But for right now, I'm just going to put a 01 in for that text itself. We'll go ahead and we're going to move this about to the top left. It doesn't have to be perfect, and we can always make changes if we'd like to it. I'm okay with how it is right now. I'm going to be adjusting the font for more of a bold look, but for right now, that looks okay. I'll go into this paint palette again, and I'm going to change the text to white. That way it shows a little better in contrast with the blue itself. Next, I do want to update the font like I mentioned before, so I'll go back into this pencil. I do like the look of the Hebo Black when it comes to having bold font, so I'm going to take a quick look at that, see if I like that. I think that looks a little too bold for me, so what I'm going to go is I'll go back just to Hebo Bold itself. I like that a little more. It's not too much, not too little, but I do like the size itself. Next, we're going to utilize our symbols here from the Insert menu, and we're going to actually add an arrow. Luckily, we're able to find that these arrows are actually at the top of our symbol library already. Of course, you can use the search field to look for an arrow if you would like, as well as the categories on the left-hand side. So for this, I'll go ahead and click on arrows just to have it be an isolated view of them. And then I do want to select an up arrow. Of course, similar to the triangles, we can always rotate an arrow, so it won't really matter which one we do pick. But for my overall ease, I'll go ahead and select this arrow and we'll click on Insert. From here, we'll go ahead and move it to where we want, as well as change the color. I'll go ahead and begin by just dragging it, dropping it to a rough area, clicking on this color palette, and then we do want to make sure that when we change the color of these symbols, we're using the border option as opposed to the fill option for these colors. You'll notice this is selected to black, so we'll go ahead and change that over to white, and then we just need to resize it to fit better on this label. I'll go ahead and grab one of these orange squares, and we'll just kind of get it to an area where it looks okay. This is kind of a quick rough one. I'll move it centered a little bit, maybe make this a little more narrow and just shrink down a little more. From here, I'm happy with this. It doesn't need to be exact. We don't need to worry about specific numbers for this, but I'm happy with this result. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on the inventory section of this label, as well as actually merging that spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and actually add that inventory tag in, and in order to do that, we do need to increase the actual width of the label. Since we are in portrait, it will be the width as opposed to the length for at least what we are adding. Go ahead back into these settings above that print option, and we're going to change that label width. Currently, it's at 5 inches. I want to add about a 3x3 square section for it, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and adjust that to be 8 inches. Now that we've actually got that added, we can actually begin on designing that section. To actually add that inventory tag, I'm going to go back into that insert menu that we've been in a couple times now, and I'm going to go ahead and actually add in a square shape. This is going to serve as a border and kind of allow us to make a little bit of a grid where we can have some text and we can kind of differentiate between certain aspects of that text. So I'll click on shape. We're going to stick with the square. Similar to what I've done before, I'll go into this color palette really quick and I will uncheck that round option. And I do want it to be a little bit thicker, so what I'm going to do is I'll increase that weight to be 2 points. And then I'm actually going to just go into the object size. I already know a rough area for what I kind of want for that X and Y value here, just to kind of get things lined up nicely. So I'll set that X to be at the 5. That way it's just at the very end of where we first had it. Click on that again since I deselected it. And I'll go into this Y. For the settings that I'm going to be doing for the actual length and width of it, I know that I want this to be 0.04 inches. That way I have a very similar amount of space both above and below the label itself. Now that we have it in the correct spot that I want it, we do need to increase the actual size. I'll click back on it since I deselected that. Click back in this object size where I'll need to adjust the length and width. I don't want this to be extending to the full bounds. I do want a little bit of white space around both sides. So what I'm going to do with the length itself is that's going to be going to 2.96 inches. And then for the width, we're going to go ahead and set that to 2.92. That way it fits nicely in this little spot like so. All right, let's go ahead and begin adding some text. During this process, we're going to be utilizing both some of the ABC text as well as some of the actual rich text. I'll go over the differences a little more in this. For the most part, I'll still keep it kind of simple. There's a lot of formatting options that can be done in the rich text. We're going to be utilizing it for just the text wrap feature that it allows, mainly with that Excel spreadsheet that will be added. Let's go ahead and actually add the text. During this process, we're going to be using our ABC text as well as rich text, just depending on the sections. For most of them, they're going to be that ABC text, but we'll use rich text later, and I'll explain why I do that when we get to there. And now that we have the text added to it, I'll just quickly move it over into the section on the right. I do want to adjust the font size. We're going to leave the font as is, though. The Air Toro font, I think, looks pretty good for this section. I don't need it to be bold or anything fancy there. I'll go ahead and set that to 20, and I'll reposition where I want this. Now we're going to go ahead and edit this text, and ultimately we're going to copy and paste this a couple extra times. We just need some different text boxes, and instead of clicking ABC text and changing that font every time, I can copy the same section and put it where I want and re-edit that text later. For this one, I'll type in item. I'll click off of it, that way I have it there. I'll re-click on it. I'll click on this copy and paste option in the top again. If you'd like, remember you can also use keyboard shortcuts for Control-C and Control-V. Once we have that, I'll just go ahead into this object size where I'm going to utilize the object position. I'll click the down arrow about 4 times, see how I like it there for the spacing. I think that should be okay, but maybe we'll go 5 just so there's a little greater spacing in between. Ultimately, I'm going to add some lines as well in between these. So I think this gives greater space for us to actually have lines and keep the text a little more legible, not have anything budge too closely. For this section here, where it says item currently, we're going to change that. This is where I'm going to have the SKU listed for the product itself. So I'll type that in. I'm happy there. That looks good. And then I do want to add one more section. So again, we'll copy and paste this once more. Copy, paste, and we'll try to move it down the same amount. So last time I moved this down by 5, we'll just do that again for this. So 5, that way we have nice even spacing between these. And for this section, I'll highlight it once more, and we're going to type in item description. Now I just need to add some text to the right of both item and SKU. In order to do that, I'll go ahead and click on this item, and I'm going to copy paste, move this over just a couple. I just want to see decent spacing between both of these words item until I'm happy. I think that looks good. What I'm going to do is later I'll actually add a line in between both items to kind of separate those sections, so that looks good as is. Since I still have this selected, I am going to copy this item text again. So copy, paste, and I'm going to move it down so that it lines up with where that SKU is from earlier. That way we have 2 rows of text that are all in even spots, where it's also 2 columns. Next, we're going to actually add the rich text in as well. I'll go ahead and click rich text. We'll go ahead and move that into the space as well for us and change this font. I do want this to be the same size font. We're going to get into some of these formatting options in a little bit. I'll be ultimately doing some left formatting. This will work for all. We don't have to worry about changing anything in this text box. All I really want to do right now is get it to kind of line up with everything else. So I'll move that over a little, maybe click that left center just so I know where everything's going to start and get it to a spot where I'm happy with the actual result. I think that'll look good. Once we actually add our spreadsheet, I'll be able to do a little more. We'll extend the actual selection box. You'll see why in a few. But for right now, I'll leave this as is, and I'm going to start working together on putting that grid in. To add the actual lines for this grid itself, we're going to go back into the shape menu. We're going to click on the line option, and I do need to increase the weight itself, so I'll increase that, and I'm going to deselect the round option as well. I know that 2.96 is the width that we have for this square, so I'll go into the object size and I'm going to adjust this length to match that 2.96. And then we also know that it's going to be starting at roughly that 5 inches in. So I will adjust this X in a minute, but right now what I want to do is I just want to kind of get it to a spot where I like for the spacing itself. So I'm okay with that. I think the spacing will look pretty good between that. I'm going to click once more back into this, and then I'm actually going to adjust that here to 5. That way there's no spot sticking out on either side, and we have a nice line that goes through everything. Similar to before, we're going to copy and paste. That way we add these lines in between some of these sections. So I'll click on the line, click copy, paste, and we're going to move it down by the same amount that we did for the SKU and item text earlier. And I'll do this for 2 different lines. Now we're going to go ahead and actually add in the vertical line that I mentioned earlier. So I'll go in, select a line again. I'm going to go ahead, rotate that 90 degrees, and I still need to also increase the weight, and I do want to deselect that round as well. That way everything looks nice and symmetrical when I add it. I'm not quite sure where this will need to be or how long this will be yet, so to figure that out, I'll just kind of move it into a rough area, and that looks actually okay, I think, for the spacing between both words on either side. So what I'm going to go back and do is go into this line size section here, and I'm just going to click this negative a few times until I'm happy with the results. Okay, that still looks a little long, so I'm going to just zoom in closer to the actual design. That might have been just a little too much, so I'll back it up a little bit. We're going to kind of move that down just a little until we can't really see anything up above, and then I know I need to bring this in a little more as well. So what I'll do is I'll hit a minus, see if that looks okay when I click off of it. So I'll just click on this triangle for right now. Okay, that looks good to me, so I can go ahead and zoom back out. If you ever need to, when it comes to zooming in and out, there's this plus and minus here for zoom, as well as one that'll just recenter the whole label. So I'll click that, get us back to center, click off, and we can kind of get a quick view of where we're at so far. All right, we're going to go ahead and add one more quick finishing touch to this label before we actually add the spreadsheet to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a QR code to the bottom right. I'll go ahead and click on 2D barcode, kind of move it into this bottom right corner here, and I do want to adjust the sizing a little bit because of course I want some more room for that actual text box that we'll add. So go back into this object size. I'm going to click lock aspect ratio. That way it's still square when we're working with it. Make it a little bit smaller overall. I think that size is going to work out fine for what we need. We'll do some double checks, of course, once I actually have everything merged. I'm also, I think, looking at this, going to add an extra line in just as additional separation between where we're going to have some text here as well as this QR code. So really quick, I'm going to copy and paste, go back, click this down arrow a couple times till I'm happy with the overall spacing that we have. I think that looks good, and because I now have an extra border up top, I can kind of utilize this to maybe space this QR code just a little better. Of course, it doesn't need to be perfect on that end, just something that you're happy with. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks, so now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and go over the process to actually add that spreadsheet into this. Okay, and before I actually start adding in the spreadsheet, I do want to clean up some of the spots on this label, so the way that I'm going to be cleaning these up is by clicking on this item, and I want this to be read-only. The reason that I'm going to be setting this up is so that I can't accidentally merge anything to this section. The areas that I want to be mergeable are this line of text, this line of text, this text box, the QR code we added, the barcode, as well as this bay number that we're adding in the top left. Anything that isn't that, what I'm ultimately going to do is just set it to read-only. That way I don't risk merging to something I don't want. So I'll click back on SKU, read only, this item description set to read only, and then even this arrow for the symbol I'll also set to read only. Next we're going to actually go into our data source connector tools, so in order to do that we'll click on this little stack of coins with the 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to click open data source connector. This will be what it looks like, and to actually add one in we just need to click on this orange plus to our left. Once we have this open, we'll use that choose file option. You'll want to look for the actual spreadsheet you have. I have it luckily right here, so I'll click on that and open. Once we have that in, I'll just go ahead and click on next, and then I do want to change this over to toggle it on for the first row contains column headers. On the spreadsheet that I'm using, I have things like bay, barcode, and website link all included as that very first row. So this is a way to kind of have those act as titles. If you have that off, that is okay, but it'll just be listed as 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, depending on how many columns you do have in your spreadsheet. Now that I've got that in, I'll click done. We can now see that the spreadsheet itself's been added. We have that bay, barcode, item, SKU, item description, as well as website link. So I'll just drag these to the appropriate location, move the bay there. You'll know you're in the right spot if you see an orange outline for a little dotted box there. Drag and drop, bring the item over. With how small these are, you can definitely see why I would change those over to read only for the SKU. Can be a little tricky getting them in, so this just helps make it easier for you. Add the SKU. We'll go ahead and add that item description into this box here, and then we just need to add that website link over that QR code. Once we have everything where we need it, we'll click on OK. We can now see that that text box we had earlier is going outside of the bounds that we kind of set up for it. So this is why I said we'll come back later and readjust that. This is another thing that ultimately the rich text does. So it does feature text wrap. So anytime you get to the edge of this actual border, what it'll do is it'll just wrap the text back down below. So anytime there's a space, it might go to the next one. If there's an extra letter on one word, it'll add that down low as well. So we'll just want to make sure that we have this in an area that we want for the text itself. I think that looks good. That ultimately takes care of that section, so everything's good there. After we have it added, we can look through everything in the data source connector. That way I can show why you would use a feature like this. On the spreadsheet, I have 8 different records of items that we're basically going to be making this rack label for. So we can scroll through those and we can kind of have one template that's going to have multiple different templates all within it and all linked to it from that spreadsheet. I'll look through it, make sure everything fits. If for whatever reason there's anything that doesn't fit, this is where I can edit things, and this is why I ultimately used ABC text for some of the text. I can still adjust some of these sizes a little bit. So I'll go ahead and scroll through. We're going to look for any ones that look off, and if we find any, we can edit that. Okay, it looks like as we got to this 4-inch premium black, it is extending outside of our label a little bit, so I'll go ahead and make a quick change to that by clicking on the text. And what I want to do is I do want to go into this edit option, and I'm going to use this fixed size. I'm going to select the width option for this because what that's going to do is it's going to make anything in this merged field that same width. Some of the text might get a little stretched out, but it won't be too much on that end, and it'll make sure that nothing extends beyond that boundary either. So I'll select that. I'll go back into our object size and I'll adjust that length. For the 4-inch premium black ribbon, it is a bit longer, so we can see that it does condense it quite a bit, but overall this will now fit. So now when I click back off, go back into this data source section and scroll back to one's previous, you can see that the green vinyl is stretched out a little bit, as are some of the others, but now we don't have anything that's going outside of it. I'll continue looking through it just to make sure that everything looks good to me on my side. We can now see that the white ribbon's here. That's another one that could have been a problem if we didn't make this quick check. And everything else looks good. From this point on, I'm just going to add a couple little finishing touches. For this, I want to add a little order more section of text down below, as well as our phone number. That way, if we do need to ever order more, this kind of points to why that QR code's there. It also gives a phone number if ever needed, if this link isn't working or if you're having difficulties placing that order yourself. So I'll go ahead and click on this item text again. One thing to make note, I did set this to read only earlier, so we do actually need to turn this off of read only just for a quick second. We'll make sure to turn that back on after. I'll click read only, copy, paste. If you have it on read only, you won't be able to copy and paste, so that's why I had to turn that off really quick. But I'll do that, and then we'll go ahead and move this new section of item down a little bit lower. That way we can kind of quickly get in there. I'll click back on item. We'll reset that to read only just in case I do need to remerge a spreadsheet. It makes sure that I still can't do that there. I'll click item, and we're going to edit this text. I'm going to change this to say order more. I think I can increase the size of this text a little bit. So instead of the 20, we'll go ahead and make that 24 just so it takes up a little more space that we have here. Because I'm not going to add too much, but I want it to at least make sure we don't have too much negative space in here for my design. Now that I have it somewhere that I'm happy with, I'll go ahead and add that phone number that I mentioned. So we'll click that order more. Similar, I'll just copy and paste it, kind of see how everything fits that way. If I need to make changes, there's a couple things I can do with either decreasing that font size, or since we're using ABC text, I can adjust the length. So I'll start with that copy and paste, just move it down a little bit so that I can kind of see some spacing, and we'll start editing that text. So we have our phone number, which will just be 1-888-789-7964. Now, of course, the quick thing that you're noticing is we are going into that QR code, so we do want to make sure we probably decrease the size of this font as well. We do want it to still be legible, so as long as we can still have that, I'll be fine with it. I think that 18 is fine, but I think I would like to go just a little bit lower. I do have plans to add our company's logo as well, just underneath that, and I do think some of the spacing for that order more is now a little close, so I'm going to just bump that up a little bit here. Maybe even move this text just a little, just so everything looks nice and in better line. To add in the actual company logo that I want to add, I am going to utilize our symbols. We have some different ways to actually add symbols. The way I'm going to do it is through just our symbol library directly. We also have a symbol creator that we're going to be making a separate video for, so I'll go ahead, start, and click on symbols, and then I'm going to click insert from file. From insert from file, I'm just going to look for the JPEG that I want to add, click open, and this will add the symbol into our label like so. One thing to make quick note of, you will notice that enclosed letters will look like they are fully filled. All we need to do to fix that is go back into that color palette and we can select white. That'll then fix those areas, and now it's just over into the object size, lock aspect ratio again, that way I keep it all looking nice on that end. Resize it a little bit, bring it over to the section, and just resize until I'm happy with how it looks on the actual label. I think this looks fine for the sizing. Everything looks nice and lined up, and overall I would say I'm ready to print this label off. And once this has been printed, you'll have your rack labeling as well. So thank you for watching this video on our more advanced guide on how to use our label designer tool. Again, my name's been Alex. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. For further assistance, visit our website and contact our team for your free lifetime support.